These are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, and it's 12:30 p.m. and welcome to the Holistic Tuesday Hour. So I'm Judith Simmons. I am the Marinara Land Care Coordinator, and I'm broadcasting here from Mitchell. And today we have Jeff Campbell back in the seat again, back from his trip down south. So, welcome to the call, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks, Jed. It's great to be back, and heard your webinar last week, which I missed out on, and was great. I was very sorry to miss it.
Yeah, we had a great time last week with Jason. He's a great guy. I'd like to remind people as well that we're very interested to hear your chat questions, and even if you do listen to this on the replay afterwards, you're welcome to give us a call or to send us an email and let us know any of your questions, or let us know any of your feedback and ideas for how we can develop this further. And from time to time, people do call me, and we love to get your feedback. So I just wanted to remind you about that. Okay, today we're just doing a little bit of a recap on what the Savoury Network is offering. And I'm off the air, I think, Jeffrey. No, I'm completely off the air. No. Not sure. Shall I stop the recording and restart it?
Yeah. You hear that, Danielle?
Yeah, okay. Hold on, we'll start the broadcast
again.
The
broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm sorry, I might have actually caused a few people to log off. We're having some internet problems here from Mitchell this afternoon, but my name is Judith Simmons. I'm the Marinara Land Care Coordinator, and we're broadcasting here from Mitchell, and I have with me Jeff Campbell, and he's back from a trip down into New South Wales and Canberra. So welcome back, Jeffrey.
Thanks, Judith. Yeah, and great to be here again this week. And so sorry I missed last week. It sounded like you had a good webinar last week. I listened to it last night, I think, and was very interesting. It was great to have Jason on board, and it's good that we can work with some of those educators as we go forward with our webinars.
Yeah, that's great. We love to get your feedback, and I just wanted to remind you, many people listen to the recording, and even if you are listening to the recording, you can still send us an email or give us a phone call. But while you're online, we'd love to have your questions as well. So don't forget, I'm watching the chat box, and you can, from your GoToWebinar panel, you can actually click on chat here at the bottom, and it opens up a little chat window, and you can type type a comment in there, or you can go into questions as well. Today we just thought we'd give you a bit of an overview of the Savoury Hub network as it's becoming clearer what that will be. So this is directly from the Savoury website. So it gives you a little bit of an overview of what the Savoury Institute is hoping that a hub is going to be. And you can see that their goal is to partner with local individuals and organisations to establish self-sustainable hubs. The hubs provide holistic management training and implementation support for families and, what does that say? Farmers and ranchers and land managers. So by 2025, they wish to establish 100 Savoury hubs around the world, providing local capacity and infrastructure to train and support thousands of practitioners. They're hoping this will influence the management of 1 billion hectares of the land, and that's about 1/5 of the grasslands in the world. So, this hub project, we're part of a very big movement around the world. And also from the Savoury Hub website, directly from it, you can see some of the services that we're gearing up here to provide. So you can see that professional training, education programs, auditing services, some project consulting, and full spectrum or comprehensive monitoring used to be called. But now they've changed that to look at full spectrum monitoring. That's just changed in the last year or so. So as you can see, there's lots of services that we'll be able to provide as a fully accredited hub, and we're really looking forward to just the run up now to September, October, when we will find out if we're fully accredited and complete some of the last processes. So all pretty exciting, Jeffrey.
Yeah, great, Jed. It's great to be part of it. I think it's a pretty important thing for our part of the world. It's great to be, we sit probably 7, we reckon, on the brittleness scale, so it'll work well here. The only Australian hub, which will be great, and I think it's getting back to what Landcare was about, like the grassroots. We get people involved. And as we always say, it's a learning site. We're still just learning. We don't expect even the trainers never expect they know everything. So it's just a learning site, and we'd love people to be involved and come with us on the journey.
Okay, that's awesome. So one of the things I promised was to show you the I made a little experiment, which is the effective rainfall demonstration, and this week is more in depth, looking at rainfall and effective rainfall. So this was before we started, and basically you put the water into the top of the Coke bottles here, and they both have soil in them, and all the runoff comes out through this spout, and that's sort of what would go down the stream, and what goes down into the bottom part of the Coke bottle in the bottom here is what would go into the recharge. Now, interestingly, I used soil from my backyard here in Mitchell, and if you know about Mitchell, you know it's pretty sandy. So what happens is, well, for one thing, the material at the top was not very moist. It was very dry, and so that caused a lot of the water to run off. It's very clean, but the recharge got a fair bit of recharge through the very sandy soil. So that's the effective rainfall demonstration number 1. I think we'll have to have another go at that and a bit more experimentation with different types of soil. I know my soil here in Mitchell with the vegetable garden, it tends to go through the soil very quickly. All the water actually goes straight through the soil because it's very sandy on the river here. I don't think I'm going to comment any more about that, but I did promise that I'd let you know that's what we were going to do, and I think it's probably we'll be waiting for take 2 of the effective rainfall demonstration. Probably selection of the soil needs to be different, so we'll take that soil out of there and have another go with some different types of soil and different sites of soil cover as well. Okay. So this week I put chapter 12 for those people who've gone ahead and got the Holistic Management book, and I know a few people have. We're looking at chapter 12, which starts at page 104 this week, and it's the water cycle, the circulation of civilization's lifeblood. So the first question in there is about what is happening. Is the water cycle effective or non-effective? Describe what is happening to the water cycle in this picture. Describe the soil surface, and what do you notice about it? And there's these two graphics. So this is the first graphic that you're asked to consider, and this is the second graphic. So what Jeffrey and I have decided to do with the answer of this is to put the 2 graphics side by side, and we've taken the answer almost directly from the textbook, but we thought it's probably quite relevant to our weather here. Now, Jeffrey, we hadn't had rain for about a month, and overnight we had about, what would you say you got? I'd say Mitchell probably got about 15 mil. How much did you say you got?
Yeah, I think we got close to 40 up home. 40 points, sorry.
40 points.
Yeah. So that's often how it falls, probably later in the year. We're lucky to get it this time of year probably, but it stays warm. But we get little bits of rain, probably 50 points a month or so apart. And often we get a bit of green pick and it burns off, especially if the country's bare, coming out of a dry season. So I think it's pretty relevant and pretty normal to get these small amounts of rain.
Yeah.
And just the way they described this in the book, I think it's pretty relevant for our area.
Yeah, and when we first started talking about this, I mentioned how I'd been out to have a look at Vicky Swan's on the weekend, and they've been doing planned grazing for almost 10 years now. They did it through the RCS course, and we jumped out at one of the paddocks and put a shovel in, and there was full moisture. There was 100% soil cover where we walked out there. There was no space between the grass at all. There was litter everywhere. There was a lot of insects. Immediately as you looked, there was ants and those sort of things, and we put the soil into the shovel into the soil, and immediately it was completely moist. And Jeffrey, you were mentioning similar thing you were noticing before it rained up there at Karawara as well. It was very moist.
Yeah, we have had a pretty good winter, I guess. There's been a bit of rainfall, but it's still trying to grow. As soon as it warmed up and the frost stopped, the buffalo and some of the native grasses, we were shifting cattle just yesterday before the rain, and you could see, 2 or 3 inches of growth, which was amazing this time of year.
Yeah. So this actually starts in the textbook from page 112. So this is the first month. So assume that 25 millimetres of rain has fallen, and all the water in both cases is soaked into the soil down to level A. So we have about an inch or 25 millimetres of water retained in the soil. So I'll just go back to the photo briefly and say that in the book, this level A is this level just below where the grass roots are reaching there. So that's what happened in July. We had about probably not 25 millimetres, but we had a little bit of rain in July, and we haven't had rain for a whole month. So that's what's happened. We're saying in the book here, over the next month, we receive no further rain. The sun shines, the temperatures are good, and the plants grow. So on the left, they grow well, drawing out about 12.5 millimetres or half of the water in the process. And no further water loss takes place. By the end of the month, there's 12.5 millimetres of water still remaining in the soil. So here you see you've got full 100% soil cover. So there's not a lot of evaporation coming up off the soil, and all of the water is retained here in the soil. So on the left, they grow well. But on the plants on the right, their roots are poorly aerated, and because of the hard cap on the soil surface, they are actually the water will run off, and there'll be not a lot of aeration. They've not grown as well as they could, and they use about 6.25 millimetres of the water, about a quarter of the water. So theoretically, three quarters of the rain should remain at the end of the month. But what happens in this on the right-hand side is that all the rest of the water isn't retained in the soil. It actually evaporates back out of the soil, so that the soil at the top in this level A is very dry. Okay, so we come to the 25th of August, and you had your second bit of rain overnight, maybe not soaking, but it was maybe 10 millimetres or 15 millimetres. So on the left, the water flows through the particles and penetrates to level B, which in the booklet is about this level here, which is the bottom of where all of the tap-rooted shrubs are growing. So we now have 37.5 millimetres of water in the soil because we retained half of it and we had an inch. And during the next month, the plants grow well, and by the end of the month, they might use that half an inch, but we will still have 25 millimetre remaining. On the right, what happens is the water flows through the soil and it's taken up by the dry particles near the surface, and the water still only penetrates to level A. So in this diagram, the water is still only penetrating to level A. So what happens in the third month is that on the left, the water will actually penetrate down to level C because it's got 25 millimetres of water here, and it's all quite moist, so you'll get water down to level C, which in the book is this sort of white area, which is the area where the tree roots, and it might be, well, Jeffrey and I were discussing how far down that might be. That might be a metre. It's actually hard to tell and probably quite variable according to where your soil is. But Helen Lewis, I know, talks very extensively about this, that, in country like we have out here where you don't have a very viable rainfall, and where, you you're only relying on storms or showers and they're quite intermittent, that getting this cycle running quite well is very important to us because, well, as my mum would say, you don't really know when it's going to rain again. So that was how we answered this question up here, which was which is the effective cycle, which is the non-effective. Describe what's happening to the water and describe the soil surface and what do you notice about it. Have you got any, you found the original passage in the book, Jeffrey, have you got any other comments to add about that?
No, Judith, just what I said before. I think it's pretty important to realise that, and as we say, here at Mitchell we probably never get enough rain, but to make the best use of the little bit we get is more than what we can do. So if we make twice as much use of the little bit we get, that's like doubling our rainfall. So, and it's just good. Often coming out of a dry time, you get a little bit of rain and then you get the plants burnt off, you get a strike again, a little bit burnt off. But to see if you can continue it to grow through the dry month or whatever until you get the next half inch of rain, you're a long way in front, that's all.
Yeah.
So that's the comment I'd like to say, Judith, here. But I'm interested in the other slide that we've got of effective rainfall coming in from the air over a property, yeah. And I have, and I know a lot of other people would have some sites that they know of where people have been managing things a bit differently, and you can actually go onto Google Earth and check those properties out, and it's amazing what you see sometimes.
Yeah, so these questions are not from the course material, they're actually from the textbook. So what does an effective water cycle look like? And here's the photo that you're referring to of a couple that it's not irrigated, it's not cropping, it's grazing land, and you can see that very clearly the boundaries of their property, and they actually were flying somewhere and happened to notice all that green grass there and realised that it was their place. And I guess that's how it happens, in that you have more water storage within your soil, and so the plants get away quicker and you get a much quicker and more effective rain when it does actually rain properly.
Yeah, Judith, I think just prolonging the time the plants will grow too. Like you get an early start as well. We're talking about the beginning of the season here, but I think as long as you've got moisture, they'll grow longer into a non-growing season as well. If they've got moisture and you've probably grazed it close to the non-growing season, when it does stop growing, it can grow longer, and it can probably be more nutritious if it's frosted or something that hasn't fully matured. So you really have a lot better control over your pastures. Yeah.
Yep. So this one is just from the textbook. Again, it's the pictorial diagram of what an effective rainfall looks like. Notice the amount of roots below the soil. I never realised, you don't really need to dig up the plants to know how much roots is below there. The amount of roots is directly proportionate to the number of foliage that you have on the top side of the soil as well. So you can tell how many roots you have by how much is on the top side of the soil as well. This one is from South Australia, and it's demonstrating the amount of water infiltration per millimetres they had on a particular site where they were managing it. I don't have the data that shows how they recorded it, but it shows a fairly big increase in how much water they could actually have infiltrated. And again, that just harks back to how much you've got stored in the soil.
Judith, wondering if we can just go back to the previous slide just for a moment.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting there. In the course, there was, I haven't noticed it in the book, but something about the stubble height of grass. And of course, we know the stubble height is related to the root depth. The stubble height, even if your plant is fully matured now, and you can push your hand into it and see where it was grazed down to last year. And there was a bit in the computer course, on the internet course, about how more effective that is, even the height of that stubble height, how more effectively it will distribute rainfall and make it up, so stop the raindrop impact, etc., etc. So I always thought that just as long as it was covered, even covered with dry grass, it'd be all right. But the stubble height is very important as well, with the new stuff they were talking about on the course there. And we've seen people that are doing management like this with this planned grazing or holistic management, that they have actually raised their stubble height, doubled their stubble height in a few years, which is quite amazing. And then it's just cumulative then. It just increases the water cycle So yeah, I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, I remember when we walked out into the pasture, if you put your hand on where you feel that the base of or the most of the grass is actually up to, then you can work out how high that might be, can't you? Is that how, when you talk about the stubble height, you're talking about how far that base is, or are you talking about putting a ruler in, or are you talking about looking at it on your shoe, or?
Yeah, oh, well, both, Jed. If you just push it and feel how far, I guess, with your hand you can push it into the soft leaf, but then you'll feel the spikes hit you where it was grazed down to last year, where they nipped it off last year. And that is what I call the stubble height. Yeah, that's directly related to the depth of the roots. So if you've increased that stubble height, I'm not sure what relation, but if you've increased it by a few inches, you've increased your roots by some relative amount as well. I'm not sure if it's a few inches, but it is in proportion. So yeah, it's just important to know. And in the last video, it was a video on the course that how important that stubble height is, and that's the first time I'd actually seen any scientific evidence or anything had done that about increasing the stubble height to increase your roots.
Yeah.
And how more effective the rainfall is. It's not only just litter lying on the ground, it's also standing height. If it breaks, say, 2 inches above the ground, it's a lot better than 1 inch, or if it breaks a foot above the ground, which in my case is probably up to a foot in some places, the stubble height is probably a foot high, and it breaks there and splatters the rainfall from there, it must do a lot better job than if it was close to the ground for some reason. Which was just interesting. I hadn't sort of thought about that before, but it seems like that's some new stuff that's coming out of some of the stuff from America that we're looking at. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's that's the exciting thing, isn't it? I mean, it has been around for 20 years or so, but there's a progression, isn't there? There's many things that you're pointing out to me. Well, that's that's possibly changed or that's been updated, and it's not that it's not moving on. Definitely, there is new research and they're working on it all the time. So the hub will be the forefront of actually seeing that sort of information coming out. So we sort of get to circulate that, don't we? We probably at the
Yeah, I guess we get to debate it, Judith, and want to know why. We ask questions about it. That's why it's important, I think, to just call it a learning hub. It's all just a learning hub, and driven by the people that are taking notice and want to know the reasons why. So it's interesting stuff to be involved with.
Yeah.
I've always known about that stubble height, and I know when I started it, I could walk through my buffer plants with my work boots on and probably not stand on any buffer grass. You could just walk on bare ground, but now that would be impossible to do. It's all covered in pretty well. And as I say, it's an accumulative thing then. Once you get that started, it seems to go just better and better, yeah.
Okay, so this was just the cleanliness of the water coming off. So, we see all our creeks when they run, they sort of run in this sort of, the dark red, real dark red runoff. And what we should be striving for is this more clearer runoff where you've got, more infiltration through all the plants. That was just two photos that I'd come up with. Okay, question 2, what is capping? Well, this is a picture from our demonstration site on Dreamland, and this is immature capping, and it's where you can put a pen or a knife or something underneath the surface of the soil, and it comes off in a little flat sort of piece. And mature capping, of course, we were talking about that, Jeffrey, before, which is where the soil is actually fully capped over, and it might have a little bit of moss growing on it, and it's very hard to break into that opening of the soil. There's a lot of or a little bit of controversy, I guess, around that capping and the understanding of it, and some people say, oh, it's just natural and how it creates stone, but it's not a very productive scenario. As you can see, there's a lot of water movement off a capped surface, and it's not particularly well protected. Some people say, well, it's just like skinning an animal and allowing the animal to live. It's not protected by that layer of litter and other plants, and it's certainly not productive, Brian. explained to us that it's part of our factory that's not producing for us. So every time I look at an area that's capped like this with nothing producing on it, well, you sort of think, well, it's part of our factory that's not returning a return on investment for us, and so we don't see it as being good environmentally or good for a production system either. So it's one of our goals to reduce those.
Yeah, I think, Judith, it's the land trying to heal itself, really. Capping, it's maybe, I like to think of the soil surface as like the skin on your arm or something, you know. It's there to protect you, but if you damage it, well, it's got to heal itself, and sometimes that capping's just like a scab on your arm. Yeah, and it's dry and hard, and water won't get in. Maybe a little gentle rain or something might soften it, but it definitely seals off. It's probably to do with a lot of the raindrop impact breaking down the particles and the fine particles sealing it off. But as soon as you get cattle on land disturbed, of course, and break it up, well, it's like scarified country then. So it's the soil surface that we look closely at to check the water cycle, and it's all about how quickly that water can infiltrate into that soil, of course.
Yeah.
So it's the infiltration, and we never want to underestimate the ability of healthy perennial plants to absorb and hold moisture. That's what they do. That's their job. They got deep roots, break the soil, the water down before it hits the ground.
Yeah.
And they absorb, hold moisture, a lot of moisture.
Yeah. So when we were doing this, we were using the darts and using the comprehensive monitoring, and we were looking at a little area, probably about a 30 centimetre diameter, and identifying, and it's a little form, and you actually tick it. You say, well, is it mature capping, immature capping? You know, how much water movement can you see? And that's the level of diagnostic that, you know, it's not that difficult really. But it's incredibly powerful to look at that level of your land. Just look at ecologically, how's it functioning? You know, how many insects are there on the surface, and all of those things. This was a quote that I quite appealed to me. What would it be worth to you as a grazier to be able to double your rainfall? It'd have to be worth quite a lot to go from a 550 millimetre rainfall here to an 1100 millimetre rainfall. It would be fantastic. But fortunately, with a little bit of understanding, you can double the effectiveness of your rainfall, and this has an even greater effect than doubling the rainfall, and that's that aspect of that water that's retained in the soil there. Okay, so how do we create an effective water cycle? This is again straight from the book, and I've just got a couple of photos. One is disturbance with cattle, as Jeffrey mentioned. A lot of dry matter and plants on the surface, and aeration in the soil, which is created by the insects. So you've got beetles and ants on the top level, and they burrow and create things. A lot of people talk about worms. I don't know whether they're that relevant here, but we have termites in our country, and they break down a lot of wood and, you know, fallen trees and things, and they create a lot of different cycling in the soil. And then this is one of Elaine Ingham's photos of a nematode. So you go down to the microscopic aspect, and they process the soil, they aerate it, and so with that life in the soil, you don't need to worry about disking it or disturbing it in that way, as long as you've got dung and urine from the animals, and then you've got this micro life in the soil biology. They actually do it 365 days a year, which is a pretty powerful thing, really, where you can only get out there in the disc when you've got time to sit in the tractor. All of these insects and biology in the soil are working every day that you've got them out there. That's one thing that Joel Salatin says about that. So comments, Jeffrey? I mean, I don't know whether you agree with me about the termites or whether you've seen worms out there. Or
No, I definitely agree with you, Judith. And the termites, of course, breaking down a lot of up the rank grasses too that have gone carbonised, or whatever we call it, lignified, I guess the word. That cattle can't digest, etc. So they help break that down as well. I was just interested in the dung beetle you had up there. It was a roller type one, which is probably a little bit more prone to be found on damaged water cycles, I think, because it's a little bit hard at the ground or something for them to burrow down and bury it in their tunnels. So they roll it up like that and stick it up on a little bit of grass so the water won't wash it away when the water comes. So Yeah, they're interesting little fellas. Those dung beetles are great, of course, and I guess everyone, after their second lot of rain, you'll usually see them. So we've had one lot now, so hopefully the next lot of rain we'll probably have some active dung beetles again.
Yeah. We see a lot of those ones that burrow here in Mitchell. I wondered if that was because of the horses or if that's because of the sand. But the ones that roll definitely do roll out on Dreamland, and maybe we will see more burrowing dung beetles later on when we get our water circle
I
week.
think, I think so, Judith. Yeah, that's just, I don't know if that's ever been proven scientific or just something I've noticed. I've noticed areas where those rollers work is more prone to a bit of water running, so they stick it up high on this dry, stalky grass and harder ground. So more damaged water cycles, I think they work in.
Yeah.
I think as you get it improved and more grass cover, you'll probably get the tunneling ones working. But I'm not sure about that. That's just my observation.
Yeah, well, it was very clear when we were doing the comprehensive monitoring on the demonstration site, there was definitely not many insects and not many, you're supposed to be ticking down, ants and all sorts of things. Well, we weren't seeing very much life on the soil at all, which, it really opened our eyes to what you need to manage and what needs to be happening. So that's what an effective water cycle looks like.
Got a lot of ants after you get this going too, and also the other type of beetles that I think are not really dung beetles, but they eat more leaves, grass, etc., etc. Yeah, so you often see a lot more of those as well.
Yeah, all right. Now, question 4. How do we recognise an effective water cycle? So
How do
I've
we
got it.
recognise it?
How do we recognise an ineffective water cycle? Sorry. So I've got a couple of photos that you might use to look at those. So one, here you can see the pedestaling of the soil, and also you see wash being left where the water's moving quite rapidly. This is not from Dreamland, but it looks very familiar, where you've got the soil pedestaling around a shrub. And around the back here, you've got evidence of rills or just light erosion. And when we were out in Vicky's place on the weekend, it was funny because she was only having problems with rills on her tracks, on her farm tracks. There was definitely no rills happening in the middle of her pasture. But as you can see from this photo, and that would have been, literally looking over the boundary fence from her place, there was a fair few examples of a fair amount of rills and water erosion and plants being undermined like this one. And you see the roots are being exposed, and you can even sometimes see roots exposed in the grasses as well, where they're just having the soil around them just washed away. And the third thing is the creeks and springs just drying up, and also the groundwater levels as well going down. So those are the things that you're looking at or are showing you that there is an ineffective water cycle, and there's plenty of examples of that around the Maranoa, unfortunately, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I think so, Judith, and probably just going back to the previous slide, when it's good when we look at those to look at them with the ecosystem processes. So look at that not only through the water cycle but through the mineral cycle as well, succession and energy flow. What would you consider there? And you can see how they're all related. If we could fix one, we'd fix the other. So it's important to remember when we think of this about the ecosystem processes as well. Although we're mainly focusing on the water cycle today, just remember that they are all connected. We can't fix one without fixing the other.
Mm.
On the next slide, Judith, we're talking about water cycle. That doesn't look that bad to me. I know the pool's drying up. It's not a very deep pool, but we've got rocks there on the bottom. There's not that much silt there. The banks are fairly stable on that little creek.
Mm.
So really, I don't know, I'm just interested to see what other people thought about that. I didn't think that was probably too bad. It's just a little shallow pool. It's not silty, not boggy. It's the banks are fairly stable and got growth on the banks, on the creek banks.
Mm.
Interested to know what other people thought about that, but that didn't look too bad to me.
Mm. I guess, a photo doesn't tell you enough about it. You sort of have to go and have a look at to see whether you can see any water running. There may actually be water running underneath the ground and showing up in this little pool. So this pool might actually be a little spring up on the surface. So you'd have to know a bit of a bit of history about it, wouldn't you? Really?
Yeah, the grass on the banks looks pretty good there.
Yep.
So, as you're right, you'd have to know a little bit more about it. I'm not sure where that photo was taken, but once again, look at it through the processes, through the ecosystem processes. The mineral cycle there would probably be not too bad, I wouldn't imagine. It doesn't look like it runs that fast to me, that little creek. There's not a big lot of rubbish on the side of it,
Mm.
not a big lot of silt. So maybe that's not too bad, that area there, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Question 5. What happens to the water cycle in urban and built-up areas?
Well, this is a big problem we've got, haven't we? And there's a pretty good slide to represent it. Like it's about what happens in the drought. I think all your water runs off. We've got roofs and concrete, and they get big problems with what to do with all their runoff in the cities, etc., etc. Yeah.
Mm. So even the footprint of your house, I mean, if you get underneath any of our houses out here, the soil is very dry and it's really just like a desert underneath there, essentially. And that if you look at how much that is of your floor surface of your house, that's how much water you're actually deflecting off a little, footprint of your house. Then you get up to, like, for example, medium development like Mitchell here, where there's a whole lot of houses and then there's footpaths that are concrete and roads that are tar sealed. And so you get a whole lot more fuss with evaporation and runoff. But then you get to, if you go around Brisbane or somewhere around in the CBD of Brisbane, you'd be hard pressed to find an area of the soil that was not covered by concrete or tar seal or a building. So it's saying up to, well, it says only 5% of the water that falls in that area is going to be 5% is going to be deep infiltration, and about 75 to 100% will run off impervious surfaces such as concrete and bitumen and those sort of things.
Yeah, amazing where we're going. Of course, all the problems they have with their flash flooding and stuff in the cities area, their storm rain or whatever. I think somewhere in the future they'll have to probably learn how to save it instead of just letting it rush off and be destroyed or cause problems. Yeah.
Yep. So that essentially brings us to the end of the questions. So we just had this slide in because we were going to speak just briefly about our plans. We've got the Mitchell Learning Site at Dreamland. We're hoping to have a visit when Brian comes back from overseas, which is likely to be October or November this year. And we're looking at writing to or contacting a lot of people that Brian was in contact with when he was out around this district in, I believe it was about 1998, and getting them all back together and having a bit of a tour of the learning site at that time. So we wanted to sort of give you a chance to tentatively book that into your diaries, I guess, and keep it on your top of mind that you might, if you're coming out this way, you might be able to book in some sort of trip around that time, or we might be able to catch up with Brian when he comes up here, because I think that will be a very exciting tour, and there'll be lots to learn just to walk through the learning site with someone at the calibre of Brian Marshall.
No, great, Judith. I'm looking forward to that because I guess a lot of people out there know Brian Marshall, but I know he did train probably up to 50 or could be 70 people altogether counting around Longreach, etc. from this area. And there was a pretty strong group going for a while. Would love to try and get that going again. Would love everyone to be able to try and come, and quite happy to have a day at Karawara if need be. And we'd like to host that around Mitchell here sometime, and probably be another launch of the official hub, Judith. I'd like some feedback to the direction, what we're going with the hub. As we go, as I said earlier in the conversation, it's just a learning centre. It's a grassroots thing. I think it's a great thing for Landcare to be involved with. It's what the people want, and it works well in our area. So hopefully you can be in touch. We'll try and contact everyone, let them know the day, and we'll try and put together something worthwhile for you around that period, and hope we can all learn something from it.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to that. Now, next week, I'm off to the Reef Range and Red Dust Conference, which is the Landcare State Conference, but it's joined with the Reef Care and Dune Care people. So there should be a really good gathering up there. I'm actually speaking, and that's part of the reason why there will be no webinar next week, I'm afraid, because I already worked out that I can't do more than one thing at the same time, and so but my presentation is going to be recorded, so we'll definitely let people view the recording. If you can't make it up to the Sunshine Coast there, I think it's in Caloundra. You can go and Google the Reef Range and Red Dust Conference anyway if you're interested in catching up with that. It's a 3-day program, and it looks packed full of different professionals. There's all the people from basically the 3 different areas: the ocean, the dune, and the land care group. So it might be quite a holistic gathering. And Jeffrey, I believe you're making your way up that way as well.
Yeah, Judith, I'll be there. Looking forward to your presentation. I think it'll be great. I think you'll do a great job with it as usual, and hopefully we might even be able to play it at some stage, or edit it a little bit and put it on one of our webinars at some stage. That would be great, because I think people would be really interested in what we're saying, where we're taking the hub, and probably a little bit more about the Savory Institute and what they're wanting to do with the hub as well. Why they're involved, why they feel they need to create a movement, and a lot of it's to do with policy, to get people behind it, to work on policy, etc., to get some good environmental policies out there, and that's the main reason. So yeah, looking forward to it, Judith.
All right then. Well, we're just finishing a few minutes earlier of time, but I think we'll leave it there, Jeffrey. And
Yes,
we'll catch up probably after we get back from the conference, and come back on air after that once we regroup. And in the meantime, definitely get in touch with us and let us know directions that are going to suit you guys. Because that's really what we're hoping to create, a community around people who are serious about making a change to their their land and the health of their land. Okay, so it's goodbye from me and goodbye from Jeffrey, and we'll catch up with you perhaps at the conference, otherwise in 2 weeks' time. All right, cheers for now. Bye.